Okay guys, I'm gonna make for you tonight this perfect potato soup. Now, sorry if the light's in there because that's just how it is. But I'm gonna make the perfect potato soup for you. Now, what I like to do for this perfect potato soup is, first of all, I've cut up all of the bacon. So, cut up the bacon first. And so what you do, I just usually take it all, squish it together, and then just cut it. So I just cut a bunch of them into slices at the same time. So I just have like a group, and then I'll just chop it. This is when a nice sharp pair of kitchen scissors would come in handy. But if you don't have it, you can just use a knife, okay? So just do that. And then while that's cooking, I'm just gonna put it in the pan. And I'm just gonna start that cooking. Now, Dad's coming in here. Dad's been chopping up potatoes. So now with soups, some soups, the idea of just chopping as you go is fine because they're in the water and you're putting little things in, and so it doesn't really matter. You can take time, but that's like with your chicken soups or something like that, or vegetable soups, you're just kind of putting in a couple vegetables at a time depending on the length of time that it takes for them to cook. So for this particular one though, this soup is made in a little bit of a different way. So I like to have all the vegetables chopped and ready before I start this soup, except the bacon. So while the bacon's cooking, then I will be chopping the carrots, and I will be chopping the celery, and I will be chopping the onions while this is cooking. So, and if it gets done before I'm done chopping, it doesn't matter because this bacon, it doesn't go in the soup. It's the ones that you just crumble on the top. So we're not gonna eat it anyway in the soup. So just put it on the side, and I dab it with a paper towel, take all the grease off, and so it's just done. So if I have to turn off the heat and then turn it back on to finish the vegetables, then that's fine. So while the bacon's cooking, I'm just going to go ahead and chop all the vegetables, okay? Okay guys, now we're gonna look at this fabulous bacon right here. Look at that. See that bacon? Okay, it's about time to take that out. So we're gonna take that out, and we're just gonna put this on this plate that I have ready with paper towel. Okay, it's just going over here. We're just gonna clean this all out. Now, you know, it's okay if the bottom of this pan is a little bit crusty with stuff, because that stuff is all gonna go into the soup, and that's gonna be yummy. Okay, so I'm gonna finish this. Hold on. I dumped out some of the grease because we don't want all of it, but we got this grease. Now, we're gonna turn this back up, and the pot's smoking. And I've got, right here, I've got 3 stalks of celery. I've got 3 carrots. I didn't peel the carrots because it just said scrub them and chop them, so I did. Then I've got some onion here. Okay. So what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna cook that up. Can you stay cooking? Now the coloring from this soup comes from the veggies, and it also comes from that stuff on the bottom of the pot. Okay, that nice yummy bacon grease. You can leave some more of that in there if you want to, but you don't have to. So this is gonna cook in here for probably like 2 minutes. About 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Now, if you notice at the bottom of the pan here, if you notice, it's already coming clean. See that? So there's some parts that are still covered with the bacon, but look, it's that moisture from the vegetables starts to loosen those yummy things from the bottom of the pan that you want to flavor your soup with.
Happy little vegetables.
Yes, these are happy little vegetables. Look at them, all covered in bacon grease. So they're just happy in there. And so we're just gonna cook that for about 2 or 3 minutes. Oh, it looks like the timer on here says we're on 2 minutes already. So we're gonna turn up the heat a little bit because it says medium high. So we're just gonna cook these a little bit. Okay, so you can just let them sit for a minute too. You don't have to stir it the whole time, but I like to get those pieces off of there before it totally starts to burn. So when I first add the veggies and it starts to break down and the liquid starts going in, I like to get that off of the bottom so it doesn't totally burn. So then you can have a nice, good color for your soup. All right. So that's 3 minutes now for that. And then now we're going to add the potatoes. So we need to drain that off. All right. So now we've mixed in the potatoes here. And this is supposed to cook for 5 minutes. I've found that sometimes I do a little more than 5 minutes because usually I'm doubling it or tripling it or something for our family usually. Probably for you when you just make it with one batch, it'd probably just be pretty close to 5 minutes. But this is when you're gonna add your salt and pepper. In the recipe, it calls for black pepper to taste and a half a teaspoon of salt. But I've realized that this seasoning right here, this Creole seasoning, also has salt in it. So it calls for just like a little bit, like a half a teaspoon of the Cajun seasoning. But you know me, I just sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. And do whatever I want with that. So let me see. I'll check the recipe to see what it says. Yeah, it says a half a teaspoon of that stuff. Well, that isn't gonna give you any flavor. So I mix it up and then I look to see if everything is coated or if it has some, some spice on it. And then we'll just mix this up. Okay, so this is supposed to cook for 5 minutes. Like I said, now once the potatoes start cooking down, it's gonna get a little bit starchy. A little bit starch from the potatoes. So you're gonna wanna stir it because then, you don't want that starch to burn. So get that going. That's gonna take 5 minutes. Okay, now, while that's going, I usually get the other things, I start getting the other things ready. Okay, so it's gonna need the broth pretty soon. And then you're gonna want the milk. But we got time for the milk. So I'll just go ahead and get the broth ready. And then we'll come back for that. So cook these down for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever. Okay, now do you see how this has kind of broken down? Now you're not going to cook it fully like this because this is when we're going to add the broth and then finish cooking the potatoes. But we're kind of par cooking this. So the starches have broken down and so you can kind of see how it's a little bit shiny here. Just make sure you're stirring around the bottom and make sure it's not getting stuck down there to burn. If you get some pieces down there, they might burn a little bit. So now we're gonna add the broth. Okay, I've got some broth in there. Now here's a good way to look at your broth. So I'm gonna pour some more broth in here. It says 8 cups of broth. So we're just gonna go. Now remember, in your recipe, you still got milk and half and half. So you want to kind of make sure you account for that. So on here, you have, this is our 32 ounces of broth. And see, serving size 1 cup. So 4 servings, so that's 4 cups or 32 ounces. Because if you remember, 1 cup is how much? 8 ounces. So 8 times 4 is 32 ounces. So if you just go by the package, it is 32 ounces. You know that that's 4 cups. I had some more broth in the fridge in another one. So that's where my other amount came from. Now what I like to do, like I told you, remember you're still going to account for some milk and cream. But I like to add a little bit. This has quite a bit of potato vegetable mixture to this amount of broth. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. Sometimes I like to add regular water to it too, because sometimes if you just have only broth, it has kind of a taste that is kind of artificial. So that happens especially with bouillon, maybe a little bit more. So I'm just adding a little bit of water here. So I'm just coming over here and adding a little bit of water. So now it's getting a little bit more loosened up, and you can kind of see how it's not as thick with vegetables. So the trick is to kind of get this, because, you know, we're still going to blend this in the blender. I don't know if you know this about this soup, but this soup we blend in the blender. So what we're going to do with that is we're just going to let that come to a boil now. And then we're going to let that come to a boil, and we're going to let it cook. Let me look at my directions here. So a gentle boil, so not a super duper boil. And then those potatoes are going to cook for about 10 minutes. So we'll check them after 10 minutes. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, especially if you've got a big pot of potatoes. It might be a little bit longer. So I'm going to let this come to a boil, and then I'm going to cook this for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to check those potatoes in 10 minutes. Okay? Okay, so here's the pot coming to boil for the soup. Now, I just barely started the timer for the 10 minutes. I did check the potatoes. This pot is a little bit big, so it takes a minute to heat up. So I just set the timer for the 10 minutes. So we'll check it back in 10 minutes. That's nice and soft. So what we do now, okay, so we're gonna turn this down a little bit. We don't wanna get it too boiling, especially now those potatoes are probably just near to perfect. Some of them probably aren't quite done, but a lot of them are gonna be done. You can kind of tell they kind of have a different look when they're cooked. Potatoes are no longer like shiny. This has, I mean, it has water on it, but I mean, they kind of lose their shine when they're cooked. They kind of look dull, kind of like a baked potato. When they're cooked, they look more like a baked potato. than a slimy potato.
Hey.
If that makes any sense. And there's your brother. Okay, so now I'm gonna add, in the recipe, it said take 1 cup of milk and stir in 3 tablespoons of flour. Now, what that does is, of course, it makes a thickener in the soup. So, if you notice after you put that in, you'll kind of stir and it'll feel thicker already. So, flour takes a few minutes to cook down and to get a little bit of a cook. So what you're gonna do now after this, I'm gonna put this thickener in, and you can already see it's kind of thickening up. Can you kind of see that? It's already thickening up. But now the directions to say to cook this for 5 more minutes. So as it cooks for 5 more minutes, the flour will kind of get cooked, and then also it will thicken up a little bit more too as it goes. So I'll come back 5 minutes for this to thicken up. Okay, so here it is, nice and thickened up. Good. Now this is the tricky part now. So now, in the recipe it says to wait for it to cool off, which you can if you want to. You're supposed to take part of the soup and then blend it in the blender to kind of make a, you know, an additional thickener. I like to mix this up with broth and the veggies, because if you put all the veggies into the blender to blend them up, then you don't have any veggies left in your soup. And I like to still have some veggies left in my soup. So I just put, I try to mix the broth and the veggies. So here's a good combination here, left in the pan. This has a good consistency left. So I'm gonna put it over here. You know, when you do put the soup in the blender over here, you gotta be careful when you blend this, because if you get it too high, it's gonna splash out. So you gotta watch out, and that's why it tells you to cool it. It tells you to cool it in the directions. But I like this Ninja blender for this, because, you know, if you just go full on speed, it's gonna come out the chute here. It's gonna shoot out. It's gonna come out, and it's hot. It's gonna come out. So I just kind of like to pull it. See how that lifts up on that when it does that? So I just pulse it. Kind of do it carefully. And then those are all cooked veggies, and so it should already be all blended up. So that's probably all blended up. So here we go. And then we're gonna dump it back into, I'm gonna take this out. I'm gonna dump that out because it'll just go into the pan. So I'm just gonna dump. So this is where you wanna be very careful. You wanna put that back in the pan. Okay. Now you got a nice creamy consistency. You still have some veggies in there. So got that. Then you got some broth. And then I think the last thing on the list is the cream, the heavy cream. I just usually do half and half because, sorry, that's not a very good picture. Maybe I'll I usually do half and half because it's got less fat, but usually full whipping cream thickens better. You taste it at this point to see if it needs more salt. It has plenty of salt. It's a little spicy. So I'm gonna stir in the cream, which is the half and half. I don't know how to turn this around while I'm recording, so that's why you get to look at the pot while I'm going somewhere else. Okay, so half and half. This is a half a cup, and I'm doing a little extra because I made it a little bit more. Now this is the point where you need to turn this down, and when you put the cream in, you don't want it to boil with the cream. Okay, so get it settled down. See how it's settling down here? Okay, I stir it up real good along the edges, get all those edges out there, and then get it settled down. You don't want it boiling on this, because if it's gonna boil with the cream, it's gonna break it up. And then it will separate, and then it coagulates, and then it's not very good. It's called breaking. It will break the cream, and then it's not very tasty at all. Well, I mean, it's still tasty, but it just kind of looks curdled is what happens to it. But if you keep that temperature down, see how that's beautiful? See how that's making a nice, beautiful, creamy look to it? That's like perfect right there. So you just don't want to ruin that beautiful cream right there by boiling that and breaking that cream. So after this point, it's done. This is done right now. So at this point, you just turn the heat down. And if you're gonna serve it later, you can keep it on low heat. Let's see what it looks like here. Keep it on low heat. If you keep it on low heat, make sure you stir it frequently. Keep it on low heat like that. And you're gonna do it later. Just make sure you stir it frequently so that it doesn't burn or break up. If you notice that it's getting a little bit too hot and that cream, like I said, you wanna protect that cream. So if you notice it's getting too hot, you can lift it off the burner and then let it sit off to the side for a minute until it gets cooled a little bit. Then you can put it back on the fire. So you just want to keep it at a stable temperature so the cream doesn't break. And then remember what we've got here. We've got all of our bacon. Bacon. Got our bacon. So remember this one? We just put it in the bowl. Oh, oops. I did forget one ingredient. Hold on. This one has parsley in it. And I find that the parsley really puts an extra oomph on it. So, I mean, you don't have to have the parsley, but I like the parsley because it kind of just makes it stand out. So what you can do is you put the parsley in the soup. You have some for in the soup. And then, like I said, you're not gonna be boiling it anyway because you got that cream in there. So you're not gonna be boiling it after this anyway. But now you got your parsley in there. And it adds a little bit of green. Not like your broccoli or anything, but not like kale or anything. But it adds just a little splash. And you know, parsley is pretty strong spice. So you don't want a ton of it because you don't want it to overpower your soup. So just put a few sprigs in there. A few sprigs. Get it looking nice. Not too much. Get it looking green. Then when you put it in your bowl, then you put the bacon on top. So you just take a little bit of bacon, remember? Plop. Some more parsley. Plop. usually cut this up to put it on the table. So you put your soup in your bowl, put your bacon and your parsley, and then some cheese. Take a little bit of cheese, put it on the top. So this one doesn't have cheese in the actual soup, but when you put it in your bowl, that's when you put the cheese in. Okay, I hope you love this and hope it turns out good for you. Love you. Bye.